Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
Hold on to your seats, football fans, because we're about to expose one of the most embarrassing backpedals in sports media history. We're talking about a complete 180, a total reversal, an absolute eat-your-words moment that's going to leave you shaking your head in disbelief. This is the story of how Shedeur Sanders, the Colorado quarterback everyone loved to hate, just made some of the biggest names in sports media look absolutely foolish. And trust me when I tell you, the receipts are all there, the evidence is undeniable, and the humble pie being served is extra large with a side of crow. Get ready because this roller coaster ride through the world of hot takes, terrible predictions, and spectacular redemption is going to blow your mind. Let me paint you a picture. Just a few months ago, Colin Cowherd, yes, that Colin Cowherd, the guy with the massive platform and the even bigger opinions, was absolutely dragging Shedeur Sanders through the mud. We're not talking about mild criticism here, folks. We're talking about full-blown character assassination. Cowherd wasn't just questioning whether Shedeur had what it takes to make it in the NFL, he was practically laughing at the very idea. He dismissed Shedeur as anything resembling a top-tier quarterback prospect. He mocked the notion that this kid could succeed at the next level. He went after Deion Sanders, Prime Time himself, suggesting that Coach Prime was just cashing in on his son's name and overhyping a mediocre talent. The disrespect was real, it was harsh, and it was broadcast to millions of listeners who hang on Cowherd's every word. But here's where this story gets absolutely delicious. Fast forward to right now, this very moment, and Colin Cowherd has done the unthinkable. After watching Shedeur Sanders absolutely light up the Tennessee Titans, after witnessing the young quarterback put on a clinic despite having a depleted offense around him, Cowherd has completely changed his tune. And I mean completely. The same man who was questioning everything about Shedeur's game is now declaring him an NFL-worthy quarterback. Not just NFL-worthy, mind you, but a potential franchise quarterback. Let that sink in for a second. The guy who was trashing Shedeur's prospects just months ago is now praising him as a future franchise cornerstone. The whiplash from this reversal is enough to give you a concussion. What makes this whole situation even more incredible is the way Cowherd is trying to deliver his newfound praise. You can hear it in his voice, that subtle shift in tone that screams, "I was completely wrong, but I'm going to try to play this off like I always knew he had it." The words coming out of his mouth are dripping with what can only be described as begrudging admiration mixed with a healthy dose of backpedaling. It's like watching someone try to reverse course on a highway while pretending they were going the right direction all along. Cowherd recently went on record saying that if Shedeur looks mostly like he looked in college, then he thinks it's going to work in the NFL. He even went so far as to call him a franchise quarterback. This is the same Colin Cowherd who was using Shedeur's draft position, his fall to the 5th round, as some kind of cosmic lesson in humility. Oh, but it gets even better, folks, because Cowherd isn't the only big-name media personality who's been forced to eat an entire buffet of humble pie. Dan Orlovsky, the former NFL quarterback turned ESPN analyst, has also executed one of the most spectacular 180s in recent sports media memory. Before the draft, Orlovsky was absolutely convinced that Shedeur wouldn't make it in the NFL. He called Shedeur one of the worst throwers in the game. Let me repeat that because it bears repeating. Dan Orlovsky, a guy who actually played quarterback in the NFL, called Shedeur Sanders one of the worst throwers in the game. He questioned everything about Shedeur's mechanics, his decision-making, his ability to read defenses, you name it. Orlovsky wasn't pulling any punches, and he made sure everyone knew exactly how he felt about Shedeur's NFL prospects. But here's the kicker that makes this whole situation absolutely priceless. Not only has Dan Orlovsky completely reversed his position, but he's actually gone and publicly apologized. That's right, a full-blown mea culpa from one of ESPN's most prominent analysts. And he didn't stop there. Orlovsky has now gone so far as to break down Shedeur's game tape, highlighting exactly where he excels, praising his decision-making, and declaring him the best quarterback option for the Cleveland Browns. The same Dan Orlovsky who was convinced Shedeur wouldn't make it is now analyzing film and pointing out all the things that make Shedeur special. It's almost too perfect to be true, but the videos are out there for everyone to see. The evidence is irrefutable. Let's take a moment to really appreciate the magnitude of what we're witnessing here. These aren't random trolls on social media we're talking about. These are established, credible voices in sports media with massive platforms and millions of followers. Colin Cowherd has one of the most popular sports radio shows in America. Dan Orlovsky is a fixture on ESPN's football coverage. These guys don't just throw out random opinions, they shape narratives, influence public perception, and impact how players are viewed by fans and potentially even by NFL decision-makers. When they speak, people listen. And when they were trashing Shedeur Sanders, their words carried weight and consequences. Think about what it must have been like for Shedeur during this time. Here you are, a young quarterback trying to make your way in one of the most competitive sports environments in the world, and you've got major media personalities publicly questioning everything about your game. They're not just saying you might not be a first-round pick, they're saying you're fundamentally flawed as a quarterback. They're suggesting your father is overhyping you. They're implying you don't have what it takes to succeed at the highest level. That's got to mess with your head at least a little bit, right? Most people would crumble under that kind of pressure and scrutiny. Most people would start doubting themselves, questioning their abilities, wondering if maybe the critics are right. But not Shedeur Sanders. This kid didn't just handle the criticism, he used it as fuel. He took every negative comment, every dismissive take, every mocking analysis, and he channeled it all into his performance on the field. And the results have been nothing short of spectacular. We're talking about a quarterback who, despite missing 4 or 5 offensive starters, still managed to throw for over 400 yards against the Titans. 400 yards with a depleted offense in conditions that weren't exactly ideal for passing. Even Colin Cowherd, the same guy who was questioning everything about Shedeur just months ago, had to acknowledge how remarkable that performance was. He called it an impressive feat, which might be the understatement of the century. What makes Shedeur's story even more compelling is the context surrounding his success. This isn't a case of a highly touted number 1 overall pick
I do
living
want
up
to
to
just
massive
make mention of Grant
expectations.
Delpit
Remember,
winning the
Shedeur fell to the
being the
5th
Cleveland
round of the
Browns
draft.
Walter
Teams
Payton
passed
Man of the
on him
Year.
repeatedly.
Very
Scouts
deserving
questioned his
for Grant.
ability
I've
to
gotten
translate
to
his
see
college success to the professional level. The narrative around him was largely negative, with critics focusing on perceived weaknesses rather than obvious strengths. He wasn't handed a starting job with a stacked roster around him. He had to earn everything, prove himself at every turn, and do it all while dealing with constant criticism and doubt from people who should have known better. And let's talk about Dan Orlovsky's transformation for a moment, because it's truly remarkable. During the preseason, Orlovsky wasn't just criticizing Shedeur's on-field performance. He was going after his interviews and personality. Orlovsky portrayed Shedeur as immature and nonchalant, someone who wasn't taking things seriously enough, someone who didn't have the right mentality to succeed in the NFL. It felt personal, like Orlovsky had some kind of grudge against the young quarterback. The criticism went beyond football analysis and ventured into character assassination. Orlovsky seemed almost eager to see Shedeur fail, constantly taking shots at him even when Shedeur hadn't been given a real opportunity to prove himself. But after watching Shedeur's exceptional play, after seeing how he handles himself in pressure situations, after witnessing the poise and maturity he displays on the field, Orlovsky has been forced to completely reassess his position. And to his credit, he didn't just quietly change his mind and hope nobody noticed. He publicly apologized, acknowledged he was wrong, and then went even further by creating detailed analysis videos breaking down exactly what makes Shedeur special. In these breakdowns, Orlovsky highlights Shedeur's ability to read defenses, his quick decision-making, his accuracy under pressure, and his leadership qualities. These are the exact same attributes Orlovsky was questioning just months earlier. The irony here is absolutely delicious. Orlovsky, who once said that everything a quarterback does is a job interview, implying that Shedeur was failing his audition, is now praising those same qualities in Shedeur's game. The former NFL quarterback who suggested that Shedeur wasn't ready for the professional level is now placing him among the league's top young quarterbacks. The analyst who seemed to have a personal bias against Shedeur is now one of his biggest advocates. You truly cannot make this stuff up. Reality is stranger and more satisfying than any fiction we could have imagined. Let's dive deeper into what Colin Cowherd said about humility, because this is where things get really spicy. Before the draft, when Shedeur was sliding down boards and teams were passing on him, Cowherd used this as some kind of teaching moment. He pontificated about how humility works all year round, in summer, fall, winter, and spring. He suggested that Deion Sanders was gassing up his kid too much, that the Sanders family needed a reality check, that they were being taught a valuable lesson about staying humble. The subtext was clear: Shedeur wasn't as good as the hype suggested, and his draft position was proof that the experts knew better than the proud father promoting his son. But here's the thing about humility and eating crow: it works both ways. If Cowherd truly believed in the virtue of humility, shouldn't he be a bit more humble about his own terrible takes? Shouldn't he acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, he completely misjudged Shedeur's talent and potential? Instead, we're getting this awkward backpedaling where Cowherd is trying to act like he always saw the potential, like he wasn't one of the loudest critics questioning everything about Shedeur's game. It's the kind of revisionist history that makes you want to scream at your screen because we all have receipts. We all remember what was said. The internet never forgets. The karma in this situation is absolutely poetic. Cowherd used Shedeur's draft position to lecture about humility, and now Shedeur's NFL success is serving Cowherd a massive helping of humble pie. The same analyst who criticized Deion for cashing in on his son's success is now being forced to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, Primetime knew what he was talking about all along. Perhaps a father who played at the highest level of professional football, who understands what it takes to succeed in the NFL, who has been around elite quarterbacks his entire life, might actually have a better assessment of his son's abilities than a radio host looking for hot takes to generate clicks and controversy. What's even more fascinating about this entire saga is how it reveals the nature of modern sports media. There's immense pressure to have strong opinions, to make bold predictions, to generate controversy and engagement. Being right is less important than being loud. Having nuanced, measured takes doesn't get you viral clips and social media buzz. Saying a highly publicized quarterback is going to be mediocre or fail gets attention. It generates debate. It drives ratings. And when you're wrong, as long as you can pivot smoothly enough, a significant portion of your audience might not even notice the complete contradiction between what you said 3 months ago and what you're saying today. But here's what makes Shedeur's vindication so satisfying. We live in an age where everything is documented and easily accessible. You can't just pretend you never said something when video clips of you saying exactly that thing are floating around on Twitter, YouTube, and every other social media platform. The receipts are there for everyone to see. Colin Cowherd dismissing Shedeur as a legitimate NFL prospect is on the record. Dan Orlovsky calling him one of the worst throwers in the game is documented. These aren't rumors or hearsay. These are their actual words preserved in digital amber for eternity. Shedeur's performance against the Titans was particularly significant because it addressed many of the specific criticisms that had been leveled against him. Critics said he couldn't succeed without elite talent around him. He put up 400 yards with multiple offensive starters missing. Critics said he couldn't handle NFL speed and complexity. He's reading defenses, making quick decisions, and executing at a high level. Critics said he was immature and didn't have the right mentality. He's showing poise, leadership, and composure in high-pressure situations. One by one, he's systematically dismantling every argument that was made against him. Dan Orlovsky's film breakdowns are especially revealing because they show exactly how wrong his initial assessment was. When you watch Orlovsky analyze Shedeur's game now, pointing out the sophisticated route progressions, the quick processing speed, the accuracy on different levels of throws, it makes you wonder what he was watching before the draft. How did he miss all of these qualities that are now so apparent? Was it bias? Was it lazy evaluation? Was it the desire to have a controversial take that would get attention? Whatever the reason, the contrast between his pre-draft criticism and his current praise couldn't be more stark. One of the specific things Orlovsky now praises is how much faster Shedeur is playing compared to what scouts worried about coming out of college. Orlovsky breaks down film showing Shedeur quickly snapping his head around after play-action fakes, finding the defense's weak points, and delivering accurate passes. These are exactly the kinds of high-level quarterback traits that NFL teams covet, and they're the same traits Orlovsky was questioning just months ago. The evolution in Orlovsky's analysis would be comical if it wasn't so damning to his credibility as an evaluator. The Cleveland Browns connection is particularly interesting because it represents how quickly Shedeur has forced his way into important conversations. The Browns have been searching for a franchise quarterback for what feels like decades. They've cycled through countless options, from high draft picks to veteran acquisitions, and nothing has quite worked out. Now, after just a handful of impressive NFL performances, Shedeur Sanders is being seriously discussed as potentially the answer to Cleveland's quarterback woes. That's not just praise, that's recognition that he might be capable of changing the trajectory of an entire franchise. What's perhaps most impressive about Shedeur's journey is the mental fortitude required to block out the noise and perform at such a high level. Professional athletes will often talk about not reading their press clippings, not paying attention to what critics say, staying focused on their preparation and performance. But that's much easier said than done, especially when you're a young player trying to establish yourself and major media voices are publicly questioning your abilities. The psychological pressure of trying to prove everyone wrong while also just trying to play your game and help your team win is immense. Shedeur's confidence has been a constant throughout this entire process. Even when Colin Cowherd was mocking him, even when Dan Orlovsky was calling him one of the worst throwers in the game, even when he was falling in the draft, Shedeur maintained his self-belief. Some critics interpreted this confidence as arrogance or immaturity. Orlovsky specifically called out Shedeur's interviews as showing the wrong attitude for an NFL quarterback. But now that same confidence looks like the unshakable self-belief of a player who knows exactly what he's capable of, who wasn't going to let anyone else's opinion define his potential. There's a broader lesson here about talent evaluation and the limitations of analysis. The NFL draft is notoriously difficult to predict. Teams with massive scouting departments, advanced analytics, and every resource imaginable still miss on prospects regularly, so it shouldn't be surprising that media analysts, working with much more limited information and often driven by the need for hot takes rather than accuracy, get things wrong. What's frustrating is when these analysts don't own their mistakes, when they try to pretend they never said what they clearly said, when they attempt to rewrite history to protect their credibility. To be fair to Dan Orlovsky, he did issue a public apology, which is more than many analysts do when their predictions prove spectacularly wrong. Acknowledging error requires humility, and Orlovsky deserves some credit for being willing to say he was wrong about Shedeur. That said, the apology doesn't erase the damage done by his initial criticism. Words have consequences, and when someone with a platform like Orlovsky's uses it to trash a young player's abilities, it can impact how that player is perceived by fans, media, and potentially even NFL decision-makers. Colin Cowherd, on the other hand, hasn't really owned his terrible takes on Shedeur. Instead, he's trying to thread the needle, praising Shedeur now, while acting like his previous criticism was somehow reasonable or measured. He's trying to have it both ways, maintaining his credibility while also jumping on the Shedeur bandwagon now that it's clear the kid can play. It's the kind of slick media maneuvering that works on casual listeners who don't remember or never heard the previous criticism, but it doesn't work on anyone who's been paying attention and has access to the receipts. The comparison to other young quarterbacks is illuminating. How much of the criticism directed at Shedeur was legitimate evaluation versus narrative-driven skepticism? When you look at his college production, his winning record, his ability to elevate the programs he played for, the case for Shedeur as an NFL prospect was always stronger than critics like Cowherd and Orlovsky suggested. But because of various factors, including perhaps the controversy and attention around his father, there seemed to be a predetermined narrative that Shedeur was overhyped and would struggle at the next level. This raises important questions about bias in sports media and talent evaluation. Are some players given the benefit of the doubt while others are held to different standards? Are media personalities sometimes more interested in being contrarian for attention than in accurate analysis? Does the quest for viral moments and hot takes incentivize bad evaluation? The answers to these questions are probably yes across the board, and Shedeur Sanders is just the latest example of how these dynamics can lead to wildly inaccurate assessments of young talent. What makes this story so satisfying for fans of Shedeur and neutral observers who appreciate accountability is the complete and total vindication. This isn't a borderline case where you could argue both sides have valid points. Shedeur isn't just barely making it in the NFL, scraping by as a backup or marginal starter. He's excelling. He's putting up impressive numbers. He's doing it without ideal circumstances around him, and he's forcing even his harshest critics to completely reverse their positions. That's total victory in the court of public opinion. The timing of these reversals is also noteworthy. It didn't take years for Cowherd and Orlovsky to change their tunes. It took months. Shedeur's NFL success came so quickly and was so undeniable that these analysts couldn't even maintain their critical positions through a full season. The evidence became overwhelming almost immediately. When a player proves you wrong that quickly and that definitively, there's no way to pretend you had a nuanced take or that the situation was complicated. You were just flat out wrong and everyone can see it. Looking ahead, this situation creates an interesting dynamic for Shedeur's career. He'll always be able to point back to this moment, to these critics, to all the people who doubted him. That can be powerful motivation fuel for years to come. Some of the greatest players in sports history have maintained chip-on-shoulder mentalities throughout their careers, using perceived disrespect as constant motivation to prove people wrong. Shedeur has plenty of material to work with if he wants to maintain that edge. For Colin Cowherd and Dan Orlovsky, this represents a significant credibility hit that they'll need to overcome. In Cowherd's case, it's unfortunately not his first rodeo with terrible takes that aged poorly, so he'll probably survive with his platform intact. But each time something like this happens, it becomes harder to take his quarterback evaluations seriously. Why should anyone trust his assessment of the next young quarterback when he was so spectacularly wrong about Shedeur? For Orlovsky, who actually played the position and presumably has expertise in evaluating quarterback play, being this wrong is particularly damaging to his credibility as an analyst. The broader implications for sports media are worth considering. When prominent analysts can be this wrong about something and face minimal consequences beyond some social media mockery, what incentive is there for thoughtful, measured analysis? If you can make outrageous claims that generate attention and then simply pivot when proven wrong, why wouldn't you take that approach? The current media ecosystem often rewards being loud and controversial more than being accurate and insightful, and that's a problem for the quality of sports discourse. But let's end on a positive note because this story is ultimately about Shedeur Sanders and his remarkable success. This is a young man who faced intense criticism, public doubt, and skepticism from major media voices, and he responded by going out and dominating on the field. He didn't make excuses, he didn't complain about the criticism, he didn't let it affect his performance. He simply played football at an exceptionally high level and let his performance do the talking. That's admirable, and it's the kind of story that should inspire young athletes everywhere who face doubt and criticism. Shedeur Sanders has taught us several valuable lessons through this experience. First, don't let other people's opinions define your potential. Believe in yourself even when credible voices are saying you can't succeed. Second, use criticism as motivation rather than letting it defeat you. Channel negativity into fuel for improvement and performance. Third, the best response to doubters is excellence. You don't need to argue or defend yourself on social media, just go out and dominate your craft. And fourth, vindication is sweet, but it's even sweeter when it comes through undeniable performance that forces critics to eat their words publicly. All right, football fanatics, we've just witnessed one of the most spectacular eat crow moments in recent sports media history. Shedeur Sanders has absolutely obliterated the narratives that Colin Cowherd, Dan Orlovsky, and countless other critics built around him, and the humble pie being served is absolutely delicious. Now I want to hear from you in the comments. Were you surprised by how quickly Shedeur shut down the haters, or did you always believe in his potential? What do you think about these analysts completely flipping their positions? Is this poetic justice or just business as usual in sports media? Do you think Cowherd and Orlovsky should face more consequences for being so spectacularly wrong, or is a public reversal punishment enough? Drop your thoughts in the comments because I want to hear what you think about this incredible story. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most satisfying vindication stories in recent football memory, smash that like button, share this video with every Shedeur Sanders fan you know, and make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on because we're going to keep following this story as Shedeur continues to prove the doubters wrong. Until next time, keep believing in yourself even when the critics are loud, because sometimes the best revenge is simply succeeding.